everybody, and welcome back to the American Academy of Optometry's clinical podcast series. We've got another low vision flavored one for you here today. I'm Bradley Dougherty from The Ohio State University, and we're thrilled to have Dr. Latham from Anglia Ruskin in Cambridge, UK with us today. Welcome, Kez.
Hello, it's really nice to be here.
Good. So, we're talking today about a paper that you've just recently published in TVST called Further Validation of Comfortable Print Size as a Parameter for Clinical Low Vision Assessment. So in low vision, we think an awful lot about assessing patients' reading, and we do it sort of with clinician judgment a lot. And I think your paper gets at a question, which is sort of why is figuring out the right print size for patients so tricky?
Which is a great question. I think that one of the issues stems from the fact that as optometrists, we tend to measure to threshold, so to the smallest that we can manage. And actually reading acuity isn't that useful to us because any sort of reading that you want to do functionally, you're not going to do at the smallest size that you can possibly read. So we need a bit of a better idea of a supra-threshold print size that's going to be useful for us. And those can be a little bit trickier to pin down. One parameter I'm a real big fan of is the critical print size, which we have to approach by thinking about the interaction between print size and reading speed. And critical print size is the smallest print size that we can read at maximum speed. So in a low vision assessment, it's a really useful thing to aim for because if we can get patients to read or turn print into their critical print size, they can read that with the minimum magnification required and so the maximum field of view. But obviously that supra-threshold point is sort of hanging in midair somewhere. So how do you find out what it is? And we do have some methods to find it. This critical print size, but they're all a little bit cumbersome clinically. You can go full on and measure reading speed at a variety of print sizes and then plot it and then put a curve to it and find where this knee point is where speed starts to decrease. But that's really time consuming. We can use an app that will semi-automate it, but not everybody's got access to that. And you can use a more standardized approach and you can kind of say, well, for a lot of people, their critical print size will be twice the size of their reading acuity. So let's just take their reading acuity and double it and we'll call that the critical print size. But all of those have got disadvantages. I find that the full critical print size measurement is a bit too much and the standardized reading acuity isn't quite enough for an individual patient. So I'd been kind of doing a few sort of pragmatic clinical shortcuts in clinical practice, and I thought it was about time I actually did a proper research study to see if what I was using pragmatically was actually any good as a parameter.
Right. So over the course of this paper and a few others, I think, you've advanced a concept called comfortable print size. So perhaps it's time to put down the stopwatch and the graph paper and the software and all of that and listen more to the patient. So perhaps you could tell us a little bit about how you've investigated this comfortable print size.
Sure. So there were two things I was doing clinically, really. One was asking the patient to read a sort of a log progression reading chart out loud and kind of trying to listen for where they started to slow down as a practitioner judgment for where the critical print size might be by listening. But then it's sort of like, well, again, that's one step removed. So I decided, well, let's ask the expert. Let's just hand the chart to the patient and say what size would be comfortable to read. And with a little bit of explanation, if you were doing a reading task, reading for a long period of time, sustained time, what would be the smallest size that would be comfortable for you to read? And then compared that against the more standard, more rigorous methods of measuring critical print size, and actually comfortable print sizes has come out pretty well.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit more about what you found and what are some of the factors you were looking at in order to determine whether comfortable print size might be an acceptable substitute?
Well, the first thing is how well it relates to the gold standard. So how well it relates to the critical print size in the first instance. And we had two papers on this. So the first paper was in Ophthalmic and Physiological Optics, and that found that there wasn't really any significant difference between comfortable print size and critical print size. It comes up as the same on average. There's a bits of individual variation, as there is when you compare anything, but the limits of agreement were pretty similar to even if you just compare two different ways of assessing critical print size. So it was coming out with about the same sort of value. And comfortable print size was reflecting critical print size, but actually it was slightly better than using a 2 times acuity reserve. And it also didn't reflect quite so well just a sort of standard 80 words per minute that reflects functional reading speed potentially. So it looked like comfortable print size relates to critical print size quite well. So we did this second paper in TVST just to delve into that a little bit more, compared it to some other methods of defining critical print size through a different algorithm with the card, and also comparing it to the app. And again, it still comes out pretty well. It's a good reflection. And we extended it there to look at how long it takes to do this measurement, and it comes up quicker than doing the app or the card assessment of critical print size, which was what I hoped in the first instance. And actually, a particular strength seems to be how repeatable this patient judgment of comfortable print size is. The limits of agreement sort of plus or minus 0.09 logmar, so it's within a step in terms of repeatability. And that's something you don't tend to see with other repeatability measures about critical print size. It's a bit of a wafty parameter in itself.
So, very interesting. I mean, given these findings, would it be fair to say that we clinicians have been overcomplicating the assessment of print size or ideal print size for determining magnification, that sort of thing?
I think both, actually. I think we both over and undercomplicate it. Clinically, for me, measuring a full reading curve and plotting it and getting the critical print size, I don't find that's practical in a clinical sense. It takes a lot of time, and I don't think the time spent versus patient benefit is really in its favour. I love it for research purposes. It's a really good standardisation. But equally, I don't think that taking the reading acuity and doubling it using this kind of standard acuity reserve, I think that's undercomplicating it a little bit. It's oversimplifying it. With these studies, we also looked at the acuity reserve that we were getting. And while 2 to 1 does for a lot of people, some people need a lot more. And some people need an acuity reserve of 5 to 1, as much as that. And it's quite variable by individual. We're not the only people that have seen that before. That's come out in the literature quite frequently, this variation in acuity reserve. So while acuity reserve is quite a quick thing to apply to an acuity, it's not individualized. And I think this is where comfortable print size might sit in this sort of happy middle ground between not overcomplicating it and actually giving us something individualized and reasonably rigorous.
Yeah, another tool for sure. I think that sounds right. So given this tool and your findings, I wonder, could this comfortable print size concept be useful outside of low vision, perhaps in our normally sighted patients?
Yeah, I found myself using it quite a lot in routine primary care as well. If you hand a patient a reading chart and you're just aiming to do a standard edition, you give them an endpoint reading chart to have a look at and say, okay, what's the smallest print you can read with this ad? They quite often look at the smallest print and they'll have a look at the N4 and go, oh, well, I can read that, but it wouldn't be comfortable. And that gives you an ideal opportunity to kind of go, well, if that's not comfortable, what is the smallest print size that would be comfortable? And then you can compare that against, okay, well, if you can see this comfortably, is that the smallest print you need to read comfortably? Or do you need to read something smaller than that for crafts, hobbies, that kind of thing? And if yes, what they can see comfortably is perfectly adequate for reading the newspaper, you're fine. But actually, if they're identifying a comfortable print size that they need, that's smaller than what you're finding, Then that gives you the opportunity to kind of go into a little bit of low vision even within a primary care, raising the reading out a bit, adding some task lighting, thinking about some simple LVAs for specific tasks. So I've actually found it quite useful in that respect, just to sort of delve into the sort of lower end of low vision aids in primary care.
Yes. Great. Well, I'll tell you what, I think the results are really interesting, and this is a really useful potential tool for us to be using. And I'm really grateful that you've come on and shared your findings with us, Dr. Latham. So thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. It's been really lovely to be here.